We would love you to sponsor us out there. If you're interested in sponsoring our little YouTube channel, lkgstudios@gmail.com. That's the email. You'll get a prompt reply. We would look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Social media, whatever.
Today we have to listen to so many things, most of which are negative. But why not listen to something positive, something that charges your batteries, something that puts a smile on your face? LKG Studios presents Positive Energy Thinking on YouTube and www.lkgstudios.com.
Here's some open and candid feedback.
Welcome back to Rodent Sports. All right, we're going to start with a little update and discussion about Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin, of course, is the Buffalo Bills DB who had his heart stop on Monday night at the early part of the Monday Night Football game between Cincinnati and Buffalo when he tried to tackle T. Higgins. He was taken to the hospital. He was in very serious condition. And quite rightly, after about an hour, the NFL just finally decided to just postpone the game. As of yet, they have not decided what they're going to do with it. To me, there's only two options that they have. One is to just declare it a tie, which I think is the cleanest and best option, is probably what they should do. The other, in my opinion, would be to have a standalone Week 19 game between Buffalo and Cincinnati because of the implications at the top of the AFC. Going into that game Monday night, don't forget, Buffalo could have won. If they had won, they would have retained their hold on the number one seed in the AFC because they would have been tied with Kansas City and they would have them on the tiebreaker. If Cincinnati had won, Cincinnati would have been tied with Buffalo for number two and would have had the number two seed based on head-to-head and would have gone into the last week with a chance at the top seed, depending on Kansas City's result against Las Vegas. That has now not happened, so we'll see what the NFL does. The good news about Damar Hamlin is that, according to his uncle, he's down to 50, needing oxygen only 50% to breathe. And I'm going to try and focus on the positive here because there's been a lot of heart-wrenching things about this. But I was called, what came to my mind as soon as I saw this was a Premier League soccer player by the name of Fabrice Muamba, who 10 years ago, and I didn't realize it was 10 years until somebody tweeted me about it, collapsed during a Premier League game with Bolton, did not have oxygen for 79 minutes. Heartbeat was stopped for 79 minutes. He was resuscitated. He went to the hospital. He's made a full recovery, walking, talking. He didn't play soccer again, but he recovered all his motor skills. He's living a normal life, and it was an absolute miracle. And then I saw somebody else bring up Christian Eriksen, which of course I remembered from a year ago, or it's actually now a year and a half ago in the summer of 2021 during the European Championships in soccer. He collapsed and was without oxygen for several minutes. And not only did he make a full recovery, he ended up back in the Premier League playing for Brentford and is now playing for Manchester United. So we have a lot of reason to hope for Damar Hamlin that he will not only recover, he could very well play football again. And I have no idea if he wants to do that or not, but there's no reason why he couldn't. This was a fluke. This was a fluke situation. He hit Higgins, or Higgins hit him at the sort of perfect moment in the chest. It's not like this is a permanent injury. It's not like this is a head injury or a leg injury that's really, really serious. If Damar Hamlin makes a full recovery, we could very well see him back out on the NFL field, and wouldn't that be a great and inspiring thing? And the other thing is, for all the sludge that can be on social media and all the people focusing on who tweeted what and who said this and who said that. Yes, him, but other people. Damar Hamlin's toy drive that his foundation was sponsoring had a $2,500 goal on GoFundMe. It's now up to $6 million that people donated, and that is a not only a national effort, that's a worldwide effort. That's people donating from literally all over the world who saw what happened, heard about what happened, and gave to this. So social media has its drawbacks, but in moments like this, it can bring literally an entire world together in sympathy for somebody who's gone through something very bad. And that's something that should be celebrated. Now let's get to something that should not be celebrated. The NCAA had a big report come out, and they recommended that almost all the tournaments that they run should increase the size of their tournament fields, which is understandable in some things. We've had a lot of growth in Division I, especially in basketball. There are now 366 basketball programs in Division I that are playing. That's a lot more than what it was when the tournament expanded to 64 in 1985. But that's the main story, is that their suggestion was that the tournament would go to 90 teams. Now, for me, this is a ludicrous proposition because 64 was perfect, and that's where it should have stayed. The reason we have 68 now is because we have 32 automatic bids through the conferences. There is actually an NCAA rule that says there has to be 36 at-large bids, which, by the way, is driven by the big conference schools and is not to help schools in non-big conferences like the one that I went to and Lamar went to, VCU, or a lot of other mid-major schools that people that may see this are fans of. It'd be one thing if I could trust the committee to be fair, to understand, to recognize great performances at non-high major schools that have scheduled up and tried to play great teams, and also recognize that big conference schools, by and large, are too cowardly to play really good mid-majors, too cowardly to play them on the road, too cowardly to even play them in neutral site places. These exempt tournaments that teams like VCU and Dayton and others play in are really their only chance to get a shot at the big boys, because oftentimes, especially if you're a really good mid-major, they won't. You call them and they won't even take your call because they're worried about losing to you and getting embarrassed if that's such a thing these days. And of course, now that we have the net and not the RPI, there's not nearly as much reward for playing on the road as there once was. So it's yet another thing that hurts the smaller schools against the big schools, because the big schools playing in the big conferences can get top 50 and top 35 net opponents at home all the time because they play they get it through their conference schedule. They don't actually have to go out and schedule it. It's done for them. On the other hand, it's an absolute federal case for a team like VCU, the school where I went to get a game like that, or Dayton, or College of Charleston, who just entered the top 25 and plays out of the Colonial. So this proposal is a terrible proposal, and there's only one way it wouldn't be a terrible proposal. That is if we unmoored the conference configurations from football and the nonsense that they've come up with and went back to sane regional college basketball conferences that are no bigger than 12 and no smaller than 7. And at that point, you'd have 40 to 45 conferences. You'd need 40 to 45 auto bids, and then you would need 96. So that you can get more teams in, or you need, 90 or whatever the number is. But until we do that, leave the tournament at 68, put it back to 64 in my opinion.
Yeah!
But leave the tournament at 68. And so that's the main thing for me. Do not expand this tournament, because you know what? It's not going to benefit my team. It's not going to benefit most college programs in America. It's going to benefit teams that go 8-10 in the Big Ten, or 7-11 in the Big 12, or 7-11 in the SEC. Teams that aren't very good.
This segment is brought to you by the New York Slice Company in Sarasota on 501 Beneva. Tell them Vinny sent you.
This last little story I'm doing is sort of a callback to a story that was big over the summer, and I sort of filed it away, but I'm kind of addressing it now. And that is, last summer, Howard University, there were hot and heavy rumors that they were going to leave the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference for the Colonial Athletic Association. The MEAC is one of two historically black college and university conferences that have been around in Division I for quite a while. The MEAC, and then the other one is the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the SWAC. So Howard almost left, and that would have put the MEAC in peril. As it is right now, they didn't do it, and they're still around, but there's only 8 teams in there. There used to be up to 13 teams in there, but a lot of teams have left over the last several years. Savannah State, who was in the MEAC, went back to Division II. Florida A&M and Bethune-Cookman went to the SWAC, and North Carolina A&T and Hampton left the MEAC for the Big South, and now have gone to the Colonial Athletic Association. And the seal has been broken. For years, Tennessee State was the only HBCU that wasn't in an HBCU conference in Division I. Now more and more are happening, and HBCUs are very attractive properties to have for these conferences because it increases diversity, it adds to the geographic footprint, and it leads to more money in the pockets of the universities because they get better television contracts. So HBCUs are wanted, and these eight HBCUs in the MEAC would be excellent additions to any of the conferences I'm about to talk about. Now, I looked at 6 leagues: the SWAC, the America East, the Northeast Conference, the Colonial, the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, and the Big South as all potential conferences that would take these MEAC teams in the event the MEAC broke up. So this is what I came up with, and there are 2 things that are critical here. Does the school in question have football? 6 of them do, 2 of them don't. And does the school in question have baseball? 4 of them do, 4 of them don't. And that's what informed and kind of guided how I had this set up. So let me start with Norfolk State, who both have football and baseball, whose men's basketball program has been on the rise. They pulled an upset in the tournament as a 15 seed. They made the tournament last year. They are a huge favorite to make the tournament again. That is an athletic program that's going places. So I think Norfolk State would be very attractive. And if the Colonial were still willing to expand, and they're expanding to 14 next year because they're adding Campbell, I think Norfolk State, along with Howard, would end up in the Colonial and would give them 16 teams. So if the Colonial is still willing to expand and add even more, they could continue to strengthen the middle of the conference that has been weakened by a lot of teams leaving.
You ain't got it here anymore.
And add Norfolk State and Howard, I think it would be great for the Colonial. Then we come to Maryland Eastern Shore, who does not have football. They're one of 2 schools in this conference that does not have football, but they do have baseball.
There's something kind of...
So where did I put Maryland Eastern Shore? Well, I put them in the America East, because the American East doesn't have football, but has baseball. And again, you're talking about Northeast now, so there would be some trips for UMES, but I feel like that's a great fit. The America East used to have a Maryland school in their conference. The America East has 1 Maryland school in their conference, Maryland Baltimore County, and they've been a little bit of an outpost, not a big one, but they've been a little bit of an outpost. And adding UMES would give them a regional rival, and also adding this other team that, like UMES, does not have football, but does have baseball. And that's Coppin State out of Baltimore. So you'd have a nice city rivalry there. You'd have 3 teams in Maryland to sort of be there with UMES. You'd give the America East more of a southern anchor. They would go from 9 teams to 11. I think it makes a lot of sense. Then we have the Northeast Conference, and I gave them 1 team and maybe another one, and we'll discuss that because one of the programs I'm talking about I think has a good fit in 2 different conferences. I gave them Delaware State, who is already in the conference because the Northeast and the MEAC merged for baseball, and they're doing that now. And so I gave them Delaware State, who's already in the conference for that, who would fit the geographic area that the Northeast is. It would actually expand their footprint a little bit and maybe give them an in on the more mid-Atlantic television network stations that they want to get onto. So I like Delaware State going to the Northeast. And then the Big South. The Big South needs football members. Next year, once Campbell leaves, they're going to be down to 9 members total, and only 5 have football. And you need 6 so that you can get an automatic bid to the FCS playoffs.
Look at me when I'm talking, son.
Well, step forward, South Carolina State and North Carolina Central, which both perfectly fit the Big South geographic area, both have football. I think the Big South, who originally got Hampton and North Carolina A&T to come before they left for the Colonial Athletic Association, would absolutely jump at the chance again to get 2 HBCUs into their conference. These 2 make a lot of sense. When I was thinking about this originally, I kind of had South Carolina State as maybe the school that would go to the SWAC and join there, and they'd be a little bit of an outpost, but they'd at least have Florida A&M and Bethune-Cookman with them as well, old MEAC rivals. But the Big South needs football members, and they need them badly. So give them South Carolina State and North Carolina Central would take them to 11 teams overall, but it would crucially take them to 7 conference members in football, which means they get their automatic bid, or they keep their automatic bid for the FCS playoffs. Now, I've left one team out up till now because to me they fit in 2 different conferences, and that's Morgan State. Morgan State has football. It doesn't. Okay. Sorry about that. That's all right. Now I've left one team out because I feel like they have 2 potential conference fits, and they certainly make sense for both conferences, and that is Morgan State, another school out of Baltimore. To me, in terms of geography, they fit best with Delaware State and in the Northeast. Because again, that would give the Northeast a Maryland school back, which they lost because Mount St. Mary's left the Northeast after being in there for a long time to go to the Metro Atlantic Athletic. So that expands their footprint, which would be good. They would go in with Delaware State, an old MEAC foe. It would kind of anchor the Southern. They would give the Southern end a little more base in the Northeast Conference. So Morgan State fits a lot there, and I think if they're worried about just the geographic fit and not having terrible travel, that makes sense for them. But if they don't want to look north and they want to look south, the Big South makes some sense for Morgan State, and it really makes a lot of sense for the Big South. Why? Because that would give them a school in Maryland. So you have Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. They'd be, like the CAA, they actually would be more than the CAA, a true Mid-Atlantic conference, because that is the Mid-Atlantic right there. South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland. You could throw Delaware in there too, but that's truly the Mid-Atlantic. They would be a true Mid-Atlantic conference. And yeah, there'd be some long trips in there. But again, you put them in there with South Carolina State, North Carolina Central. They've got familiar conference rivals to begin with, and they could develop a rivalry with some of the other football schools, especially the Virginia ones like VMI, who are in there. Actually, wait a minute. VMI is not in there anymore. I'm sorry. Okay. Scratch that. But that would also both cameras too, by the way. That would also give the Big South 8 football members, which is the right number for most football conferences. 8 or 9 is usually about the perfect number in terms of you have the right number of conference games, you have the right number of non-conference games, so that you can schedule your guarantee games if you want to, where you can make some money for the school, or maybe even 2 of them if you want to make some money from the school, or whatever you're going to schedule. So I think Morgan State fits both ways. Certainly the travel for the Big South would be more difficult because they would be going south all the time, and they would have some long trips in there for both basketball and football. But the Big South would certainly love to expand their footprint. It would be a better TV contract for them if they got a school like Morgan State. So I think they'd at least be interested. Definitely think the Northeast would be interested. So that's what we're talking about here for the MEAC. I don't want the MEAC to break up, but it is something that all these schools know is a possibility and have to be prepared for. Of course, none of the conferences I'm talking about may be interested in expanding, and if that's the case, then there's nothing to worry about. But if they are, to me, these are where the schools should go. These are the best opportunities. And look, the TV revenue that these conferences are about to get when they renegotiate, it may eclipse the share that these 8 schools get now from something like the Celebration Bowl, which is one of the things that I think is keeping the MEAC together now, is the fact that they get a spot in this bowl game against the SWAC champion. And it's good money. It's good money for both conferences. The attendance is high. The ratings are good for it. People watch this. So, but I think it is also entirely possible, especially depending on which conference you get in, that the increased television money from going into one of these other conferences could eventually outstrip the money they're getting from staying in the MEAC and being in the Celebration Bowl. It's sticky times for the MEAC, and they don't have a lot of places to go to expand, because over the years they've had several of these schools were in the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association, which is the Division II historically black college and university conference, or one of them. And a few years back, Winston-Salem State was going to do that move. They were going to go from Division II to Division I and go into the MEAC. Then they changed their mind and went back. And I just don't see many other schools in that CIAA willing to make that move and willing to make the financial sacrifices that are necessary to do it, because it is very expensive to go from out of Division I into Division I, especially if you have football, which a lot of these CIAA schools have. So the MEAC's in a tough space. I don't want them to break up, but if they are, they need to be prepared. And this is what I think would be best for those schools if they do. So that's Rodent Sports. I want to thank you for watching. Listen, subscribe, comment, share it around. We appreciate the conversation. Until next time.